Jean, would you unmute yourself, please?
I am unmuted. I'm ready to go.
Great.
It's such a pleasure to do this. And such a good segue from the scholarship presentation we just heard. Andrea Burgay's work is just wonderful, and it's very thoughtful, very rich, memorable. Complexity, her surfaces are very complex, and not only do they speak of decay and destruction and change, there's a hint of archaeological excavation and revelation in what she does. You can tell that time passes while the work is developing. And I think that without time passing, you don't get the kind of resonance you get with her work. So I like the word alchemy. I think this is alchemy that we're witnessing here. She takes mundane materials and transforms them into something beautiful. Andrea is currently living in Brooklyn. She's well known in the New York scene, but she's becoming well known internationally, partly because of a totally cool project that she's working on that she will go into in more detail. Genoa, Italy. She's been affiliated with Unimedia Modern Contemporary Art there. Gallery Zurcher in Paris, France. Numerous New York galleries and spaces. She has received a number of awards. I'll mention just a couple. The Kimmel Harding Nelson Center for the Arts in Nebraska City, AIR in Brooklyn, the Wassaic Project Fellowship Award in Wassaic, New York, the L&S Kaminsky Family Foundation in Jersey City, New Jersey. Her publication that I referred to is called Cut Me Up. It's online. You can also get physical copies. And another artist who is affiliated with her did mention that it's a wonderful invitation to cannibalize something and transform it into something new and exciting. So she'll talk a little bit more about that. Cut Me Up magazine. She's going to speak a whole lot better about her methods and inspirations, and I'll just finish with a quick quote that I liked. She said, "These works reveal cycles of growth, deterioration and rebirth, religious ideals of transcendence, and a belief in the magic of the everyday." Andrea.
Thank you so much for that great introduction, Jean. It's a pleasure to be here with you all. I'm really happy to have the opportunity to share my work with you. And thank you also for postponing this talk. I'm happy to be able to do it today. So I'm just going to get started with sharing my screen and making sure I get into the right view here. And I think we're good. Everybody sees?
Yes.
Perfect. Wonderful. All right. So I have my talk all prepared. And in my talk today, I'm going to share about 4 of my recent series and some of the concepts that unify and separate them. A bit about the history of my work with collage that led me to work in the way that I presently do. I'm going to talk about my process and use of materials, and of course, how the work relates to my collaborative curatorial project, which is Cut Me Up magazine, as we just heard a little bit about. So please feel free to ask questions about specific works as I go, as was already introduced. And I'm going to move into my second slide here. So I've been thinking a lot about this idea of regenerative collage because I was asked in January earlier this year by artist, librarian, and writer Katie Blake to include my work in her book, What Kind of Collage Is That?, which you can see here on the bottom right. And this book is a thesaurus of collage techniques, their variations, and visual examples of each for artists, gallerists, and museums to better understand the rich history and current practice of collage, which is a really great idea. She thought there should be more language around collage. And so she asked me what term within the book I would apply to my own collages. And she sent me an early copy of her book. And I went through all these really great ideas. And I couldn't find anything that really encompassed these cycles of destruction and reconstruction that I'm interested in. We talked about decollage, we talked about excavation, and I use all these things, but there wasn't a term that described this entire cycle. So then Katie shared that in her research, she found that a lot of artists, especially women, do not take a step to name what they do. And this means that the naming or attribution of a term or technique, it leans heavily towards male creators. So I definitely took this as a kind of challenge that I needed to come up with a term for my own work. And this was the idea that I came up with, regenerative collage. And this describes both my work and my work with Cut Me Up magazine. So the term relates to something being a reborn or grown again, as well as a spiritual renewal or revival. And I think of giving a new life to an object or material as a way to bring the past and the unwanted and overlooked into the present in a new form, a sort of revival or resurrection. So this term describes the physical process as well as the intention of my work. And in my works on paper and sculptural objects, I use discarded or unwanted materials to elevate and transform that which has been used and then abandoned. I create the work through this series of connective actions, which includes arranging and attaching materials, followed by a series of destructive actions, cutting or tearing away and obscuring elements. And this process becomes the metaphor for the themes that I explore, including cycles of life, death, decay, and rebirth, reconstruction, and the reconstruction of memories of the past. The bodies of work that I'm going to discuss also address experiences of the passage of time and loss through multiple approaches, including remembrance, memorialization, and transformation. So this piece is called Courage, Strength in the Face of Pain or Grief, or Collage. And this was made from a book that I bought for $2 at a thrift store in Wyoming, where I was attending an artist residency. People often ask me what it is that draws me to the books that I use. And here it was the original title of the book, which was Courage, Strength in the Face of Pain or Grief. And this was a book of short stories, possibly geared towards middle readers. But the intensity of this definition of courage really hit me. And I had also never before noticed the similarities of the words courage and collage. For me, collage was a way to develop this kind of strength and courage. So I really wanted to make a piece that brought out this particular meaning that I found in this book. So in this work, there are chunks of layered paper, pieces of woven wallpaper, and perforated paper edges, which I selected to respond to the colors and the textures of the original cover. And this new version speaks to the concept that within pain, loss, and grief, there is always the potential for courage and for transformation. This is a selection of works from my fiction series. Like the previous piece, which is a part of this series, these works are reimaginings of the past, rebuilt anew. These works evoke corroded objects, accumulated piles, forgotten things left to decay. I like to imagine them as objects found as is and excavated from some pile in a basement or an attic. Some are forms that spill out into space, while others are composed and enclosed, keeping their secrets beneath the surface. I imagine that these objects have taken on lives of their own, with neglected memories and ignored histories pouring out of them and mixing, growing and deteriorating at the same time. They no longer communicate what they once did, but they now explore realms of remembrance and projection, nostalgia and evolution. Using the actual books in the work references the intimate experience of looking at this scale. I grew up reading books, looking at art in books, and this is experience I'm very connected to. As I previously shared, the books that I use are selected primarily for a cover image or title that resonates and that I want to respond to. Discards or books that are no longer valued are often from genres that don't age particularly well. So the themes, however, still come through in these transformations. And these two are an action book on the left, Barbarians, The Secret Emerged, and a sci-fi book on the right called They Followed. And these two are romance novels, Adjacent Lives and Where Love Has Gone. I often keep the titles of the books as the titles of each piece, as they influence my work with the book as much as the cover imagery does. These two are again an adventure novel on the left, Flame Winds, All Is Lost, and on the right, more like a literary book, I guess a drama. And both of these titles were slight adjustments from the original title, taking the idea in slightly new directions. And both of these also have a more figurative quality based on the original imagery as well. These two are, again, a sci-fi novel on the left, and on the right, a drama. On the right, Mirror Water, it had large areas of flat color, this kind of purple that you see there, which were really difficult to work with the way that I work. But sometimes that element of dislike can push a piece in a really interesting direction, I find. It's a little easier to work with than something that you start to get attached to. And these two are also part of a subset of the fiction series called the Portland Archive. And it was 6 pieces of media that I purchased on a trip to Portland, Oregon for a couple of days in 2021 that became their own series, memorializing the trip. These two are entire magazines, the pages glued together, collaged on top of, and then carved into and sanded to evoke the weathering of natural forces. On the left, It Don't Matter to Me Now, and on the right, the ocean. And these works are called bindings and unbindings, as they use the book boards or the interior pages of books. These were craft books or books of costume jewelry as substrates. And these works are a little bit more representational and illustrative in their imagery, or at least I think of them that way, although they're still very abstract. And each was paired with a Shakespeare quote as the title. Sometimes I like to make works first and then find words that match them, that kind of pull out the ideas I was thinking of. Now we're moving on to another series. So these works are called reliquaries. And these are sculptural collages made of piles and accumulations of paper ephemera. Each of these is a portrait of a person that I've either had a close personal relationship with or who has deeply inspired me from afar. These memorials are made to honor the memory of those who've passed on or passed on from my life, in any case. Embedded within each reliquary are objects or mementos related to the person portrayed, relics of the relationship or symbols of their life. So this particular piece is for the musician David Berman, whose songs and writings I very much admired and inspired me. And of course, I don't have anything personally related to him, but the image that's kind of worn away on the cover was from a Rolling Stone magazine about the life of a musician and the kind of perils of fame. So that was my kind of relationship or entry point to working with, kind of talking about his life. And here the title of the piece is a title of one of his songs, Black and Brown Blues. This is another reliquary. This is called Breaking, and it's the first of a few pieces that I consider to be self-portraits. This one is an accumulation of personal memories and aspirations. Embedded within are layers of magazine and calendar pages, travel and art show pamphlets, and ephemera that once held plans, dreams, and images of inspiration to me. And here these elements are attached together to make a new form, but the surface is torn, scarred, and raw, yet the tears, scratches, and textures connect in places, forming subtle lines and relationships. I think of breaking as allowing something new to emerge from these relics of the past. And these are ruins. So these are larger scale collages. These use broken down pieces of posters, illustrations, magazine, and book pages to create forms, textures, and values that I work with in a painterly way. I often reference the scales of different print media in my work, as you saw with books and magazine pages. And so these are the sizes of posters that I use in their making. I think of these as collage drawings in the sense that they are abstract explorations that capture emotional or psychological experiences. The compositions evoke forms and energies moving. And I think of abstraction as a way to convey what is unnameable, unknown, or too broad to be conveyed through representative images or symbols. And this piece is actually the works that I showed that were made on layered magazine pages. It's kind of like one of those magazines deconstructed and exploded onto a larger paper, if you can imagine that. This is a favorite piece from this series, Never Going Back Again. It combines inked and painted black paper with aged, faded, and yellowed white paper. There's this undulating pieced together form made of torn pieces that careens across the page as it breaks down and dissolves. There's imagery from 80s home and craft magazines worked in that punctuate the muted color palette in places. And I think this is a form that comes together and falls apart at the same time, which could be said about a lot of my work. The title here refers to the Fleetwood Mac song, Never Going Back Again, from Rumors, whose sentiment and structure influenced the piece. And music is another strong strand that goes throughout a lot of these works. On the left is Not the End, which has almost a vortex-like space made up of all these little layered bits of collage. And on the right is a very recent piece called Lifetimes Past, with a very gentle color palette. But in both of these works, it's hard to tell in photos, but the layers are built up almost like a topographical map. And we're kind of moving from small scale to large scale. These are larger works, the works in my Requiem series, which reconstruct places and experiences through the lens of memory, emotion, and imagination. These works memorialize my past and try to make sense of bits of memory that stick within our mind's eye, the way painting on a wall or the imagery of a certain type of wallpaper might be what stands out as reflect on scenes from the past more than, the face of a loved one or the person you were in conversation with. Or that's the way my memory works anyway. Memory is a very personal thing, of course. These works attempt to understand and integrate trauma. They speak of loss of innocence, loss of home, and loss of family. And let me know if you want to look at any piece longer than, or we can return to them later. So there are a few things I think of as kind of my introductions to collage when I was younger. And there was a game that I think of that my mother set up for me when I was very young. It was called a Puzzle Go Round. And she would take all these different frame puzzles, these wooden puzzles where you put the pieces into this frame to construct the puzzle, and lay them out on a round table and put all the pieces from all these puzzles in a bowl in the middle. And it would be my job for the game to separate them all and find their right places. And this sorting of mixed up pieces and arranging them into individual cohesive elements took on a different meaning to me after my mother's death in 2018, when there was an unbinding of a lot of family dysfunction and trauma, and understanding a deep, severe mental illness that permeated throughout my family. And after that experience, it became much clearer to me how this process of sorting and organizing and separating individual parts from an enmeshed whole has been a lifelong psychological process that is mirrored in my work, especially in this series. This piece is another piece that I consider a self-portrait, and I used painted papers, both added and then torn away, to create these forms that overlap and collide with paths of movement and energy. And at the center of the chaotic and tumultuous forms, there are several yellowed images of flowers, curtains, and a folded book page, if you can find them in there. And these break that movement, connecting to a moment of stillness within the piece. As I was saying before, my works connect with different sizes of media, print media, that I use in the work. And in this series, I think of these works as walls that have wallpaper and kind of reference the idea of sticking things and hanging them on a wall. And you can find some of that in this piece as well. And these works integrate some materials from my own past, including drawings from notebooks, saved collage clippings, with my current painted paper and wallpaper samples that I often use. I think of these as representing the walls of the past I once inhabited. I find that collage easily evokes the memories of the past in different eras in time by using the actual materials that trigger these memories, as I'm sure you all use in your own collage work in different ways. Combining images of home decor from a particular era with hand-painted paper made to look like stained wood and wallpaper samples that have a woven effect. This work evokes my grandmother's home. This is called The Gift. So that was my recent series, and as I present my work, people often ask me what led me to make the work that I'm making now and how I started making collage. So I wanted to share a little bit about my history with the medium. This is a collage book that I made while studying drawing and painting at Purchase College in Westchester, New York in 1999 to 2000. And I think I had one collage class, but of course you couldn't really study collage. You could study drawing and painting, so I did. And I made these collage books in my spare time. And my interest in collage at this point stemmed from my simple desire to collect and combine all of the images that attracted me and just catalog and preserve them. Let's see. Oops. I'm going to go back to that one just for a minute. Okay. An image I don't have, but that should precede this one, is what I consider to be my first collage, which was actually also a book, and that was an alphabet book that I made with my mother when I was 4 or 5, when she would write down a letter on each page and give me magazines to cut out everything that fit that letter. So, you know, for the letter A, I had to find apples and angels and anything that started with the letter A and cut them out and stick them in this book. And of course, this was a literary exercise at heart, but I think of it as the starting point for my interest in using collage to make sense of and organize the world. So now we jump forward about 10 years from that last image. And in those 10 years, I made a lot of artwork, but I really wasn't sure how to tackle my deepest concerns. So in 2010, I started this series of works called Human Nature. At this point, collage had become the foundational method for my work at this point. And I had started breaking down magazine images into abstract shapes, creating palettes of color and texture that I could play with and combine. In these works, I began to more directly confront the difficulties I experienced, and my work became easier and more personal and honest. These explore entropy and some of the same ideas of my current work, as well as the suggestion of hope and rebirth. In these, I wanted to understand our body's nature to deteriorate and decay, and our inability to control the processes of aging, illness, and death. I made these works to visualize these concepts in a way that I could relate to, making them less terrifying. They explore similarities of the structures of our internal organs to elements of the natural world, like the branching structures of tree limbs and roots that look like the neurological pathways in the brain. This series included small-scale assemblage sculptures like these, which used stuffed fabric, plastic, and paper bags that mirrored the concepts of the collages in the series. And this is another series from 2012, Becoming a Ritual, when the aesthetics of celebration, both religious and secular, were an inspiration for this body of work. I became very interested in how rituals and holidays and celebrations intertwine the present moment with the past through repetition, this celebration of life with the ever-present knowledge of death. In these works, the designs, patterns, and colors that hold the spiritual and symbolic meaning were created through printmaking processes. So it's kind of hard to tell, but a lot of these colors are made through different types of printing. And there's also collage materials of body parts that are merging and falling apart. The title of this piece, Grigri Rising, refers to a voodoo amulet used for protection, while visually the piece also references the white and gold fabric, often decorating a Catholic church, which are both symbols of connecting to other worlds from the earthly. And this is another piece from this series with separate components that are unified in some places. Constructed landscape using a lot of different materials. Let's see. And from 2017, my neighborhood series connected my personal studio practice with the Brooklyn landscape that surrounds me. Layered and torn posters for shows and products on construction barriers were inspiring, as this found paper no longer communicates what it once did, but becomes abstract forms and colors that can be beautiful compositions to come across. The past histories of those materials and what they were meant to communicate are lost, but they enter the present to become something new. And this one is a wall drawing made of bits of fragment and fabric, kind of a landscape I think of. These are two more works from that series. On the right, this piece is called Words, which explores a deterioration of language and communication, kind of like I was talking about these posters where bits are erased and sanded away, and so you no longer know what it was meant to say, but it becomes something else entirely. On top of layers of color and forms are these linear shapes that vaguely suggest letters weaving through the composition and then move back into lines. So I share these older works to show that my work had been dealing with the same themes of cycles of life, death, and decay for some time, but these works in this particular series held the beginnings of this being embodied in the process of making the work, as opposed to it being depicted with the clean lines and forms of the earlier work, with the tearing here and layering and deterioration becoming part of the physical, time-consuming process. So these works led into the works that I make now. And these are some photos that show the materials and the process that lead into what I'm doing. I think maybe Todd Bartel has spoken to you all before, and I think a lot about his ideas of finding, minding, and binding when I talk about my process, which I think is a great way to think about your collage ideas of putting things together. So there's a quote I like to share about materials that's by Candice Goucher, and it was published in a book called Beautiful Necessity, The Art and Meaning of Women's Altars by Kay Turner. And the quote is, "Accumulation is a good word to describe the process of acquiring objects that begin to have meaning both in and of themselves and in relation to events, people, places, or ideas. The accumulation of objects over time begins to have a power of its own that exceeds the power of the individual object." So for me, as I'm sure with many of you, the process begins with the selection of materials. As I've shared, each series has a specific starting point based on a particular type of printed media, such as a book, magazine, poster, postcard. I have a collection of paper that includes these materials, as well as cutouts, wallpaper samples, and all kinds of salvaged ephemera. And these are arranged into palettes, organized by color scheme, era in time, or theme. And like the quote speaks to, seeing these materials laid out in relationship to each other just begins to create connections on its own. So this was in Gentile, Wyoming, as it says on the bottom, where I was in residency. And I had a very large space in which I could lay out everything that I had, which was really a great way to work, just to see everything and look around the space and see how they connected. I also like to share, I don't like to start with things that are too precious. Something already aged or broken invites further dismantling. This is another photo from my studio in Gentile, which was back in 2019, the last residency I did before the pandemic. And this studio also gave me a space to hang all the materials I brought with me, along with the painted paper that I created for use in some of the requiems that you saw earlier. So I was able to make all these different colors of painted paper and hang them on the wall before they moved into the work. And this is the beginning of the piece you saw earlier, The Gift. So with these pieces and other large-scale works, there's a great deal of arranging and forming connections between the elements before I even begin to attach. And it looks very messy. It's just putting a lot of things down and just moving them around for quite some time. I often work on large-scale works and small-scale works simultaneously, because with these I can't make a commitment to attaching anything for quite some time. And so I get very anxious. So I have to use the small works as a way to kind of be productive and have that energy of getting something done be satiated. So though the works are incredibly labored by my hand, I embrace the transformations created by the slightest movements. There's random associations between shapes or textures or fragments feed into the work and reflect the forces of nature and chance. You can see that a little bit here, again, with things laid out, and some of them tend to move on their own, and it becomes a better place than I could ever imagine for it. And here you can see some of my palettes on the left. These are food trays, I believe vintage food trays that have different sections that I use. And in this one, you can see paper chunks. So these were pages glued together that were already built up, and then I tear them into chunks that I use to build up in another piece. And this is my Brooklyn studio. So this is more how the work on small scale works happens. If starting a fictions piece, the smaller pieces with books, I may start by tearing the book cover apart and rearranging the pieces to fit like a puzzle.
Excuse
I
me,
may,
Andrea.
yeah.
There's a question. What is the ground for the larger pieces?
Yeah, so the larger pieces are on 30 by 40 inch printmaking paper. Yep.
Thank you.
I think it's called Rivs BFK, but it's a very heavy paper, which I use specifically so that I can tear things off if I need to and build things up and it can hold. Yeah, I had a printmaking residency once, which is why I used a lot of printmaking materials in some of the works that I showed. And I didn't really take to printmaking, but I learned a lot about materials through that residency that carried over into my collage work. Let's see. Right, so, and with the smaller pieces, I continue arranging and attaching layers of paper, then tearing, carving, or taking them apart. Often these pieces become chunks that I can remove on their own in sections or break these down into smaller forms. And these steps are repeated multiple times to create a cycle that takes time and then mirrors the effects of the passage of time, including the weathering, destruction. So the visual relationship between elements guides this work. It's a little bit different between the fictions and the requiems in that sense. The larger works are based on those specific memories. And with these works, it's more of a response to the materials. Those are the two ways I often think of working. I've been finding recently that when I make a piece and I think it's almost done and I'm happy with it, if I return to it, it needs one final transformation, which I think of as kind of giving it its own life and having it be fully removed from what it once was. This is a little bit more process. This is a reliquary piece. So it has specific mementos you can see on the left that I was going to incorporate into it. There are a wallpaper, so this was about a relationship with a friend of mine, and this was a wallpaper sample that she'd given to me because wallpaper samples are very important to me, so she knew that it was a very special gift. There's a little sticker on the bottom right that came from Williamsport, Pennsylvania, where we met, and these are brass casings or bracelets that she made after her father died. So it kind of started with this collection, and then I was building up all the layers on a book, which is the second image, and I had to tear the entire chunk out and to remove it. And then it ended up going back in a different direction, which is the third piece on the right. So it's the arranging, tearing away, and rebuilding. And this is the finished piece. And I call this piece Things Not Seen because it has so many methods in it that are not seen, but also these materials in it that have this kind of relevance to me that's not seen.
Andrea, could you go back to the last slide, please?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It's a very organic process for me, although I think it may look kind of strange to other people just to, I don't know how it looks to other people. It's hard to see things through other people's eyes. The last step of my process is always cutting away and clearing what is unnecessary and clarifying what's essential. I consider the process a continual balance of holding on and letting go, holding on to the driving force of a piece and letting go of anything that doesn't really work. And this is just a little bit more process. Here are some of the fictions books, the original books on my shelves that I display them on. And then here are the transformed fictions on the same shelves. They're not all the same books as what you just saw, but it gives an idea of how they start and what they become. Okay, so now we're moving on to talking a little bit about Cut Me Up magazine. And Cut Me Up magazine, it can be an entire presentation on its own, which I've done many times. But here I wanted to talk a little bit about how it relates to the ideas of my work and these ideas of regenerative collage. So Cut Me Up began when I had this idea to make a magazine that people would cut up and respond to by making new artwork from it. And I had this idea for years before it was published. And I would walk around kind of telling people about it, and people would be like, oh, that's a great idea. I think that artists are better suited to communicate with each other visually rather than having to translate everything back and forth into spoken language or written language. You know, we often tell everybody like, your work is beautiful, I like it, things like that. But I was thinking there could be a more rich conversation through people responding by making new work out of it to tell artists what they're thinking, how they relate to it. I wanted artists to respond to either the aesthetics, the meaning, the concept, or the symbolism behind the published works by cutting, reconfiguring, and transforming them into new artworks. And then the new artworks would form the content of the next issue. One of my published artists, Daniel Mantilla, described the magazine as a traveling curated exhibition that in its invitation contains the promise of generating a different traveling curated exhibition. The works that I created for the first issue are personal, delicate, and abstract. I wanted to use these works to start a conversation and bring my work into a cycle of exchange with others. In 2018, I launched Cut Me Up magazine with 19 of my own works that were an offering for others to transform. I had no idea what would happen, and I was amazed by 120 response artworks from 50 artists to this first issue. Several artists made entire portfolios of up to 9 pieces in response to these artworks. And from these first submissions, the artist John Whitlock and I curated Cut Me Up issue 2 inside out. So on the cover here, you can see a book excavation by the artist Ben Donino, where he cut out bits of every single page of issue 1, and this is kind of the skeleton of what was left. We chose the works that felt the most personal and connected to the works in issue 1. This is the artist Kless's piece on the right, which maintains elements of my composition on the left and utilizes that same kind of sense of mystery, but here he takes it in his own direction. I just love this piece. After issue 2, I introduced a new guest curator for each issue, selected because of their deep engagement with collage as a contemporary medium. So our issue 3 curator was Todd Bartel, and he issued a call asking artists to consider landscape history to incorporate a subtractive collage method, such as erasure of some kind, and to integrate the idea of blank space as possibility. And you can see those in the third piece on the right by Ruben Frejo. So these arrangements I call transitions, which show how artworks have been transformed by different artists in response to the call for each issue. And this is a really beautiful selection. My work on the left, Alan Bealey responding in the middle, and then Ruben Frejo on the right, erasing that shape of the base. This is another series from those first 3 issues. I'm going to show these very soon at Collage Fest in New Orleans, actually. And so the second one is by Jessica Stanzo, responding to the issue 1 work. And then on the right, Luciana Frigerio, erasing a lot of that image. I think she was using, what is it called? That kind of sponge with a metal, like a Brillo pad or something like that almost, to erase away parts of the work for her piece Air. And these are kind of a strange transition. My work from the left, Keith Childress in the middle, Layer of the Uncanny, where he has this crazy monster kind of form with, that's his cat's hair on the top. And then on the right, the skeleton kind of falls over in this piece, The Sky is a Poisonous Garden, which is all about the effects of fossil fuels on the atmosphere, responding to Todd Bartel's call about landscape. So we've had many curators of over the 11 issues of Cut Me Up that have come out. Other curators have introduced concepts including assemblage, making collage 3-dimensional, making the means of attachment in a collage visible, a visible element of the work. And here you can see up to issue 4 with different artists, Christy Hughes for issue 2, Janice McDonald for issue 3, with this beautiful process of weaving, which then becomes this kind of digital pixelation in issue 4, which was about responding to the current moment through the lens of data. Some of the themes have included, as I said, addressing the present moment through the lens of data. We had an issue about envisioning utopia, creating our own utopias in order to better create them. And that's on the far right here with issue 5, envisioning utopia. A beautiful piece kind of exploding outward from that second piece, or the third piece. And here you can see how in later issues we went from this idea of assemblage became very influential through multiple issues, and artists started making 3D work. So we have issue 6 from Object Lessons, which was curated by Michael Oatman, a great collage artist and curator. And then issue 7 was all about alchemy and circles. So this artist, Ian Maschel, shredded the entire magazine to make this kind of sculptural form. You can see the swan in the middle there, if you look closely. And then in issue 8 was about guided by instinct. So artists thinking about our relationship to the animal world. And again, it became kind of a 3D form from the issue 7 piece. I asked the curators to consider the title of the magazine, which is called Cut Me Up, you know, like I offered my work in the first issue, and think about something kind of personal to offer the artist to work with, because it's a very, it's a vulnerable thing to give your artwork to other people to transform. It's not just putting it out there, which is difficult enough on its own just to put your work out there, but to say like, hey, do what you want with this and respond to it. So I try to keep it at a place where everyone can feel comfortable and respected by this kind of honoring each other's vulnerabilities. So I wanted to share one other insight about the magazine by Daniel Mantilla, who I spoke about earlier. And he said that I enjoy the magazine is a precious object that invites me to not respect its wholeness and to go against the etiquette for handling valued books and artworks by cutting, tearing, erasing, and reconfiguring its parts. So in summary, I find that life is made up of these endless cycles of growth, loss, and regeneration, but it is the possibility of transformation which makes these cycles bearable. This concept is central to my work and my work with Cut Me Up magazine, and to make this process visible spreads the hope that it brings. So thank you so much. And I'm going to stop sharing, I think. Is that good? Unless people want to see more as we talk.
Barbara, what do you
Yes.
think?
Well,
Thank you so much, Andrea. Let's see. Shall we just go back to full screen of everybody?
sure.
Yeah, I can always share again if we need to.
Yeah, let's do that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that was fantastic. Oh my gosh, so much to observe and all the beautiful things you're reasoning. I see a lot of applause going on from from everyone.
Thank you.
One person mentioned that we should see all of this in a book. And since this is going to be, this video will be online, you will have a chance to, on your own, go through the entire presentation and spend as much time as you want on each piece. Unfortunately, we won't have Andrea here to respond to it, but you'll be able to see them.
Barbara, where can we find the recording of this?
It will be on the website, and it
Okay.
will be a recording of the entire meeting. So you may have to fast forward through the meeting parts of it to get to the presentation. But
Right.
the
I
whole
have-
thing will be there.
Thank you.
I have a question for Andrea. What about Cut Me Up? Is there a place that we can go see what's happening with the?
Yes. So I'll just tell you a little bit about what's happening next with Cut Me Up as well. Can you all hear me? I just moved my headphone. You can hear me okay? Okay. So Cut Me Up we're launching issue 11 very soon. I actually just sent it to the printer today. So this is the 5th anniversary of Cut Me Up. I'm going to be presenting at Collage Fest in New Orleans a panel about the 5th anniversary of Cut Me Up with curators and artists who've been involved since the very beginning, and have a small exhibition of some of the works there that you saw, some of the transitions. And I'm also going to have the first in-person exhibit of Cut Me Up works at the Albany International Airport in New York. I don't know where everybody's located, but it's going to be up for 6 months, actually, from June 30th till December. The works in the next issue, issue 11, the actual works are going to be on display. And issue 11 is souvenirs, which is very fitting for an airport gallery. So it's all kinds of responses thinking about the history of collecting and keepsakes and what souvenirs mean to people. And with each issue, there's also the call for the next issue. So once that is launched, you can buy it and you'll see in the back page how to respond to the next issue, which is going to be by Alan Bealey, is going to be curating that, who's another great collage artist.
Where do you find
Yep.
to buy it?
So Cut Me Up Magazine is just the website, cutmeupmagazine.com. You're going to be able to buy it there, see the submission details, see all the other issues. There's a few places that sell it across the country, but it's easiest just to buy it there.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Yep. And I have a mailing list as well. So if you go to the website and you want to just add your name to the mailing list for now, you can just do that as well. As well as for my own work.
Are the submissions for Cut Me Up supposed to be all analog or can they be digital? I'm just curious. I don't do digital, but I'm curious if you have a rule about what, can be submitted.
Yeah, so it's a loose rule, right, that people should use the physical issue and cut it up. But if they make something where it seems that they've done that or close enough, I don't reject submissions based on that. We do have very strong guidelines to get print quality images, though, because we're printing a physical magazine. So we need high resolution images created from whatever method you make your piece. You got to get a good quality photo or scan of it for it to be good for print.
Thank you. I was just curious about what we were looking at, if some of them were, digital.
Yeah, those ones are not actually digital, except for The Sky is a Poisonous Garden, I believe had a little bit of a digital reworking.
It seems to me that the nature of what you're doing and Cut Me Up, it would have to be tangible analog, but
Right.
but that's my interpretation.
Well, you're correct. That's how I feel. But then some people respond in their own way. So,
You have to be open-minded, right?
Exactly.
Any other questions for Andrea?
It was just a wonderful presentation. I think it gives all of us a lot of ideas. And, having all of your little bits and pieces and gluing them together. I saw a bottle of probably matte medium there. Everybody always asks, what do you use for your glue?
Yeah, I use a bookbinding glue, PVA adhesive, which is pH neutral glue, just to try to make those materials preserve as much as I can. And I also coat my work with a UV semi-gloss medium by Golden, which I just brush on, and that creates a kind of solid surface for the work, which helps with all those little bits, as you said.
Now, do you for display, do you frame them or put them under glass, or how do you, particularly the kinds on the board, the paperback ones?
The ones on the books?
No, not necessarily the ones on the books, the ones on the
large ones. The large ones
format ones.
on the reeds.
Yeah, the large ones I get framed in a shadow box frame so that there's a spacer, because they're very textured. So then you can kind of see it with the glass about an inch away from the work, which is expensive, but it looks very good.
Andrea, I have a question. Do you think that there's anything in issue 11 that you can trace all the way back to issue 1? Or at what point do you think things started to disappear?
That's a great question, Claire. And people always want to know that. So a funny thing about Cut Me Up is that, my first issue was mostly abstract, but there was these little clay faces in it, and people love these little clay faces. They made it through, I think, till about like issue 4, these little like wacky clay faces. And then I think around issue 5, there wasn't that much imagery left. But then some people have been saving the older issues. So even though they respond with the past issue, they bring it back. And I curated issue 10 again for kind of the anniversary of Cut Me Up. And I think people wanted to get my attention by showing me those bits from issue 1 again that were from my work. So they all came back for issue 10. Like there was a cat on the cover, some cats came back, some of that texture came back. Yep.
That's great.
Which that's, yeah, the conversation, you know?
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So anything else for Andrea? Andrea, it was wonderful. And I'm sure many of us will be going back and reviewing all of your work again and studying it. And it's certainly inspired by it. And the words that you have used are extremely meaningful and have such potency for so many of us. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to talk with you all and to share my work. You know, you can see it on my website, a lot of that work too. And I have an email list as well, if you want to join my email list. I also have, there's a podcast of me talking about my work through the Weird Show, if you want to hear that.
Yes.
I don't know if, yeah, so there's Maxamatic does a great podcast interviewing artists, and there's a piece from a couple years ago. But thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure to talk to you all and hear your questions and have the chance to share.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And just, wait a minute. Oh, here we are all up. Okay, well, now this gives us a chance for all of you, any of you that want to make a special announcement about something coming up for you, an exhibit or this or that, or if you have any questions for the board, now's your chance to speak and say what you'd like to. You can raise your hand, or what's a good way to do that?
At this point, I think we can just unmute and be informal. And if it gets too crazy, we can go back to chat.
Right. So yeah, just unmute yourself and talk. And then if you're done, then mute yourself again. Try that. So anybody, any new members that would like to introduce themselves?
There we go.
We'd like to meet you. Okay, a lot of people have signed off.
I'll make an announcement.
We got Lauren too.
Yeah,
Gotta
Lauren
be.
never made it in, which is, I don't think. I have a show right now at the Thousand Oaks, excuse me, Community Gallery through Thousand Oaks Art Association. It comes down soon. And another one also at the Thousand Oaks Art Association that will be going up on June 1st. And it is through the West Valley Art Guild, I think it is. So I'm going to have 2 pieces in that show.
Good, congrats.
Thank you. Thank you.
Toby, you have something you'd like to say?
Yes, you know, John, the JCC is honoring John Paul Thornton this Saturday.
Who is?
John Paul Thornton,
No, who is honoring him?
the JCC, the Jewish organization.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
And I'm going to have a collage table there, and it's going to be set up that I have the canvas, and people can come by and glue on different pieces of collage.
Oh,
How fun.
Where is it, Toby?
It's going to be on Van Owen. There's a building near the shopping center, the Rose something, you know, but it's $75 to get in. I don't know if any of you have signed up to go, but
Wow.
it should be fun.
wow.
Maybe you
Okay.
could put something on the chat, the address or something.
I could probably do that, yes.
Yeah.
I want to acknowledge that Lauren is here. Lauren showed up from.
Great.
Hi, Lauren. Oh my gosh.
I caught the whole, thank you. I joined right as Jean was giving the introduction. So I'm so happy I raced over I had a lecture actually this evening. So I guess my announcement is that I will be finishing my art history dissertation on Thursday of
Oh my God.
next week. hopefully. So that's fine. But yeah, but it's so wonderful to be here. That was just outstanding presentation.
Oh, yeah, thanks for being here, sweetheart. Anybody else have any other comments or announcements they'd like to make? Let me just check my notes and see if I have any last minute things I wanted to say, which I can't remember. I want to take the opportunity, though, to thank the board again, because each of you do your job so splendidly. And it makes this whole organization work. And you are deeply acknowledged from my book.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sil.
And anybody else?
Thank
Anything
you,
else?
Sylvia, for
Yeah,
holding
well,
us all together,
without you,
doing it all.
Well, thanks.
speaking of connections and whatever, without you.
I went back, I was with Suzanne and Patrice when we went to see the live show again, because I was so busy the night of the reception that I didn't get to see the artwork up close and personal. And it is amazing, the variation and the scope of all of the work that was in that show. So I urge you to go back to online juried shows and see it again. And then you will also see a couple of people who did not ship their work that wasn't in the show. And those pieces are fantastic as well. And I thank Mitch Plesner for doing the video for us. And it was daunting for us the first time venturing into the kind of adventure, and he did a great job. So thank you all, and hasta la vista.
Okay.
Okay,
See you at the next
Thank
one.
bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Everybody.
Have a happy summer, everybody.
That's
You
right.
Too.
September.
Toby, are you there?
Did you?
No, she's
No,
gone.
Yeah, I
Did you-
don't know where she was exhibiting. That sounds interesting, like a venue in Van Owen. I'm going, whoa.
Jewish Community Center. And I guess you
Oh, I
JC.
see. Okay.
I think she
Yeah,
assumed
yeah.
we all know about it, but I am
Okay.
not
Gotcha.
sure. Okay.
Okay,
All right.
bye.
guys, I love you.
Bye.
Thank you. Mwah.